Hi, this is Dave Collins from Software Promotions. Welcome to the second part of Beat the AdWords System, 14 ways to cut your Google AdWords costs. I've been working with Google AdWords for a long time, actually long before it was even open to the public. And like most products, the number of features within the system has grown enormously over the years. Some of the new features are more useful than others. And while AdWords has been a polished product for quite a while now, the last few years has still seen a lot of new features quite quietly introduced, many of which lie hidden within the campaign settings, most of which unfortunately often go unnoticed. Problem is that Google have an unbelievably irritating habit of not only silently adding new features, but actually enabling them by default. For example, not so long ago they started to display ads on mobile devices such as iPhones. This feature was quietly and discreetly added within the campaign settings, and by default it was enabled. And I guarantee that some of the people listening to me right now don't even know that you're paying for your ads to be displayed on iPhones. And I guarantee that a lot of you won't want to do so. It's one of the many default settings that our company regularly turn off for our clients. You need to keep an eye on these changes. How do you keep an eye on them? Well, you can follow our blog at blog.softwarepromotions.com, but more importantly, it's a really good idea to become very familiar with the account settings. Familiar enough to notice when something new is added. And don't rely on Google's announcements. Most of the new features that they add go unmentioned. But ignorance is no excuse for wasting money. And if you think that all of Google's defaults are good for you, it's probably a good idea to think again. Next, we have the idea of segmenting. Now, many AdWords accounts begin with a campaign targeting all or at least most of the world, usually with a fairly small budget. Generally speaking, it's a really good starting point, as it's the only real way to set the ball rolling and get some real solid data that you can work with. But once you get beyond dipping your toes in, it's time to tighten the reins and start improving the efficiency. So once you have some data to analyze, it's not only time to break out in separate ad groups, but sometimes it's a good idea to break out in separate campaigns by countries or regions. One of the most obvious reasons for doing so is that the US tends to be highly competitive, and in language of AdWords, competitive often means higher bids are necessary. The problem is that if the US is in the same campaign as, for example, Asia, then you're going to be spending far more than you usually need to in these other countries, many of whose keywords usually cost a lot less. And don't forget the lower performing countries. Set up a specific campaign for countries with a low ROI and set lower bid levels. Even though you might see a country like India, for example, traditionally producing a lot of clicks but almost no conversions, it may actually prove to be cost effective if the clicks only cost 2 to 3 cents. Don't dismiss any country as a waste of money until you've pulled down the bids to rock bottom and actually proved it. In fact, don't assume anything before you tried and proved or disproved it within your AdWords account. Otherwise, you could be shooting yourself neatly in the foot. Next, don't neglect the click-through rate. We've already looked at the importance of conversion data, but too many account holders set up the tracking and then only look at conversion data, or sometimes make this the primary focus, more or less ignoring all the other information within their account. You know, the guy buys a hammer and then he starts looking around at all the things to hit with it. He goes from being productive to being destructive, and sometimes he ends up hurting his fingers in the process. As in all things AdWords related, oversimplification can actually be detrimental to your return on investment. As an example, let's consider an ad group with 4 ads. Now, the first 3 ads have got reasonable click-through rates and reasonable conversion rates, and while the fourth has a great click-through rate but low or really no conversions. Now, too many companies would quickly delete ad 4 on the basis that it's ineffective. In actual fact, that would be quite a big mistake. Even though the conversion rate is non-existent, the 4th ad will actually be good for quality score, meaning that it can raise your other ads' average positions and also lower their bids. So even though the ad might not directly translate to conversions, it can indirectly boost them by improving the placement, visibility, and performance of the other ads. On the other hand, if your analysis doesn't cover ads, keywords, ad groups, or even whole campaigns that aren't performing well in terms of click-through rate and conversions, then get rid of them. And I've seen accounts with one horrible performing campaign, the reason being that the account holder was intending to improve it eventually, for only spending $1 a day there. So what harm can it do? Well, the answer actually is quite a lot. and the damage caused by poor performers may extend far beyond the actual location of the ads. So it's really important to identify the poor performers and get rid of them quickly. Track, experiment and refine. Next, click-through rate versus conversion. This is where we're going to get a little bit advanced, but bear with me. By the time we finish, it's all going to make sense. Now, we've already looked at the importance of both click-through rate and conversions, but AdWords unfortunately isn't about following one simple rule. It's about multi-layer data analysis. So let's take a look at some data from an example ad group. In this ad group, we can see 3 ads with varying click-through rates. Now, if we're going to judge solely by click-through rate, ad number 1 is clearly the top performer. But if we factor in conversion rates, we can see quite a different story. And here, ad number 3 is clearly the top performer. But how can we not factor in both of these factors while making a decision? For want of a better name, I like to call this a click-through conversion rate, a value determined simply by multiplying the 2 figures with each other. So factoring in both click-through rate and conversion rate, we can see that in fact ad 2 is the top performer. Is this something you should factor in every single time you consider an ad's performance? No, but it's another layer of information that allows you to decide how informed you want each decision to be. No one who knows what they're talking about ever said that AdWords was simple. Next, love your broad match. You probably notice when you go searching for information on AdWords that the signal to noise ratio is, well, let's say it's poor. Worse still, AdWords fears, most of which are irrational, come in waves, much like search engine optimization. So for example, issues like working with the content network and broad match are alternately praised and decried. Now, we've all heard absolutes like the content network's a waste of money, broad match is dangerous. The fact is that while broad match does involve an element of risk, it can also give an ad group a kind of shot in the arm and improve performance. A good technique is to set broad match bids lower, monitor them carefully with search query reports, and then analyze the data. But it's vital not to overlook the importance of regular monitoring with search query reports. Leave the account to run on autopilot and it's guaranteed at some point it's going to turn around and bite you in the back. Today's trends may have little relevance by next week, so constant monitoring is required. Track, experiment and refine. Next, hone your Excel skills. Most Excel users seem to fall into one of 2 categories. Those who use Excel for everything, from grocery lists to tracking how much sleep they get each night, to those who use them only for reluctantly opening attachments they receive by email. Excel is phenomenally powerful and it's an invaluable tool in your AdWords toolbox, but for many users, particularly the non-technical, it may need taming. At the very least, it's worth spending some time on reading a book like Excel for Dummies, or seeking out how to work with the likes of filters, sorting and pivot tables. These are all really useful techniques that save me personally hours of time every week, and they'll help you to sift through the volumes of data to find the information that you need to make informed decisions. Working out how to do these things might actually prove to be a lot easier than you anticipate. So learn Excel, it's time well spent and it'll save you money. Next, focus on landing pages. Now, landing pages are all too often overlooked. They're not a case of there may be a slight improvement. Targeted landing pages mean better conversions. It really is that simple. They also mean better relevance, leading to better quality score, leading to lower bid possibilities, higher average position, better click-through rates, and better ROI. Now, creating a basic landing page isn't a major undertaking. Sometimes all it takes is adapting an existing page's headline and maybe the first couple of paragraphs of text, and that's it. If you're not yet using landing pages, why not try to set up one single landing page today or tomorrow and see how it works? The whole thing should take less than an hour. It's quick, easy to implement, easy to measure, and it really pays off. So what are you waiting for? In conclusion, we've looked at 14 different ways to cut your Google AdWords costs, all of which can have a massive impact on the return on investment that you manage to achieve with your Google AdWords account. Good luck!